Hello and welcome back to Connected with Eva. Today's guest is Rashina, a writer, speaker, and transformational belief coach who helps global entrepreneurs, creatives, and agents of change rewrite the beliefs that hold them back. With a background as a United Nations consultant, Rashina has worked with over 200 women-led businesses in developing regions, using the power of storytelling to support their global expansion. Now, as the CEO of Amplify Studio, she continues to guide individuals and brands to show up with clarity, confidence, and purpose. Her mission is rooted in one truth: when women believe in themselves, everything changes. Before I started the podcast, I actually thought, well, I'll just do solo. It's completely different to what it is now. I'm going to do zero editing. And obviously that's not what happened. You know how everybody says we're all imposters, right? None of us know what we're doing. And I always thought that's amazing of you to say, but you're a CEO or entrepreneur or this or that. And actually it is true because everyone I speak to says that. And nobody knows what they're doing 100%. Everybody's always figuring things out, finding out new ways to do things, new ways to think, new ways to see opportunities. Actually, I wanted to start with that. And my first question for you: what is something that you had to change and figure out about your own self when you set out on the journey you are on today?
I had to figure out a lot of things. There were so many different things that I had to learn about myself. I think I would say that I probably spent the last 10 years trying to find out things about myself in a pretty intense way. One of the main things is that the way that you view yourself can change. This is incredibly malleable and you can do it in any direction, right? So I had some years where I would see myself in a way that was totally distorted, full of fear, full of doubt, insecurity. And then I also was able to change in a different direction where I would be growing and seeing myself do things that I never thought that I would ever feel comfortable doing, and seeing myself put things out into the world and take on responsibility. I think that was a really big learning over the last 10 years, that the way that you see yourself today can change in any direction, which is why it's important to take care of it and to nurture it. And this means that you're never limited. You can at any point turn the page, open a new door within yourself, and start walking through a totally different life. I think that's something that I didn't really initially know, and it took me some time to figure it out. And what I did is I moved to a lot of different cities and countries. So I was kind of experimenting with reality. I was trying out different roles and different ways of living. And that really helped me to integrate that understanding.
Because you mentioned distortion, where do you think our limiting beliefs and, that kind of way to look at ourselves comes from?
It is a collection of things, in my opinion. I think that it's something that baseline everyone has just from being raised in the same systems. We see inequality, we see people being idolized, we see the insecurities of others, we're comparing. These are things that I think a lot of people have anyway. The media accentuates it as well. We're seeing bodies of people, images of people. Many of us also saw, in the 2000s, women's bodies getting scrutinized and criticized. And so you also have this lens of the kind of media landscape and the programs and shows and things that kind of reinforce certain stories and narratives about human beings. So some of those stories might be the starving artist or the person who goes through this perilous journey and ends up on top, or there might be some stories around people who are just never good enough. And I think that we do resonate with these based on our own childhoods. And that's kind of one way in which limiting beliefs are reinforced. The other kind of foundational way is your childhood and your early experiences in life. Beliefs are mainly formed between the ages of 0 to 7. So when we're mainly operating on a subconscious level, which means that if you had a childhood where you had a lack of stability or somebody said something to you that wasn't very nice, you accepted it as truth. So you may have accepted stories about money, about relationships, about how the world works for someone like you. You may have accepted narratives about you and your desirability to be a friend or as a person or your gift and talent. And there are so many elements of that that are just kind of coded into our ecosystem. We never realize that we're carrying around in later life. Often it does take having a session and actually going through, okay, well, what are the subconscious stories that I've been carrying around and that I haven't been questioning up until now, for people to realize. And in addition to that, I would say other trauma, like trauma that you have in your life, in your day to day life, in the workplace, in your adult relationships, you can at any moment have a difficult experience that teaches you something, and you may carry that teaching into the world in a way that doesn't benefit you. So that also could be a limiting belief. Imagine a person who's in a relationship that is just terrible and they decide, I don't trust men, men can't be trusted. That's a really classic example, right? And then because they have that belief that men can't be trusted, they only attract into their lives untrustworthy men. There are many, many things that create beliefs, and these are just a couple of them. This is why I think that we're entering into this era of people being more aware of what's going on inside so that they can really reclaim the narrative.
Talking about awareness, obviously that's something that goes around quite a lot as a word.
Okay, so the first thing I would say about it is you get what you're ready for. I think that many people, they see and they read, oh, it's so important to develop self-awareness. It's like being a good student, right? You want to get like the 10 out of 10, the A star grade at self-awareness. But I think that you really only get what you're ready for in small doses. I don't think that you can become the most hyper self-aware person overnight. And I think that that's a good thing because it might be too much to handle. I think if you're someone who's interested in self-awareness, it happens over years and through many different waves of experience and trying things and observing yourself and getting triggered by a lot of things that also create self-awareness if you get really curious about that. I don't believe in just driving self-awareness for the sake of it. I think that it's something that if you're really ready to become more aware, it's messy and it takes time and it's very sometimes painful, sometimes really beautiful. It's really not a consistent type of thing to that can kind of unravel in that way. And I think it's important to take this journey with a lot of self-compassion, to not look at the people out there who are speaking and doing podcasts and in the media who are talking about this and try and take their version of it and apply it to you. I think you can look to that and see what seeds that plants in your own mind and carry that into your life. But I think it's really important to just try and lean into yourself and develop the relationship that you have with yourself. And if you do that over many years, you're always going to be learning every single day something new about yourself.
I love that. Well, this one is slightly controversial, I think. And it's something I'm very interested in. Do you think everyone has the capacity to change?
The first thing that I would say is I do believe that everyone is capable of change. Not everyone is willing to receive change, though they might think that they are. This is a kind of a crucial distinction. Not everyone also has the circumstances that can facilitate change as well. I think it's important to recognize that. I do think that if you're really, really willing, you can find the circumstances and create the circumstances. But I do, on the whole, have a deep optimism for how much people can change in their lives. I do think that it's dependent on every person's life path and their choices and the way that they exist in the world and what they've come here to learn. I take that lens on it. Sometimes I work with people and I get the sense that there are some areas that they're not ready to go into yet. And so then I don't push for those areas because I know, okay, this is the thing that they're ready to actually change. And this area is something that maybe at a later point, maybe not even in this life, maybe it could be something that's just carried on to the next generation. But I do think that change is inherently something within every person's reach. There are a lot of people who do talk the talk and who go to therapy and who are very kind of aware, but who don't seem to be really able to change. And I think that this is because not only are there gradients of change, but it happens on many different levels. So you can change how you're thinking, you can change a lot about your physicality, you can change your energy. And I think that for change to be really deep, it has to be holistic. I was raised in a pretty cerebral society in Britain. I didn't really believe in energy work. I didn't really know about spirituality at all. I just kind of, like I said earlier, I just went into the world and tried to experience myself in lots of different ways. And that brought me to this, which is that you can't isolate change to something that is convenient to you. So, okay, I'm happy to do X, Y, Z, but I don't want to do this. And I think a lot of people like to be in control and they like to feel that they're on top of their life, and it goes maybe against their self-image to let go. There are some things, if you really want to change, that you have to let go of control, you have to receive and be open to different ways of changing. So I love doing energy work. I also love doing things like Kundalini yoga, which is more focused on the energy. These are kind of different modalities, such as, for example, theta healing is a good example of this, hypnotherapy. You can target change at different levels. So you can do changing the way that you're thinking, which, by the way, is one of the most difficult things to do in the world. Is really intensely difficult. And there's also, going and changing yourself on a subconscious level, changing yourself on a physical level, changing how your cells are moving is also a really valid way of change. And energy work. So finding where is the energy stuck in your body? Where is your body literally holding on to something like anger, like sadness, like bitterness, and that's keeping you stuck. There's also just the nervous system element of this, which is if you experience a difficult traumatic experience in your life, your body is wired in a way to respond to similar types of threats as though they are the replication of the event, right? So for some of those people that we see around there and we think, okay, like you think that you're doing the work, but it doesn't seem to be working, or it doesn't seem really that that's the case. It's because there's a lot of energy happening in one direction, and usually some of the other places are being kind of neglected.
While conventional therapy could be extremely helpful, sometimes people believe that just because they've gone to a session or they go to sessions, change should come to them, or people should tell them, now you're better because we're speaking. In a way, that could be a very superficial level, especially if you're hoping that from this conversation the change will happen rather than from you doing work. For example, over the past few months, I've done a lot of different exercises or journaling, and every time I actively do things, I notice a change. And when I stop actively doing things, maybe I'll look back into an old pattern. So that process of doing self-work in any capacity, like you say, is so important, and it cannot be replicated by something on the outside of you.
I think it really does come back to self knowledge and learning to listen to yourself deeply, which is something that many people are surrounded by noise and obligation. So it becomes very hard to listen to yourself. Usually, when you start to listen to yourself, that's when you understand, okay, why am I stuck on this particular theme? Whatever that theme may be, maybe it's health, maybe it's money, maybe it's relationship. Is it because I'm holding on to something that I need to talk with someone? Like I need to do talk therapy? Is it because I had an experience that my body is still holding on to? Is it something that I just need to do? And as I do, the energy is going to shift. For me, limiting beliefs are a great vehicle because I think that if you have a belief about something, it's usually rooted in something, and then you get to change the story and release what you're holding on to. For some people, maybe they find a different modality. Like some people, they love hypnotherapy, and then they just do a million hypnotherapy sessions around different subjects. Like I think a lot of things help on different levels. And it's just about kind of leaning into yourself and understanding, okay, what feels intuitively like it needs to come up. And though I have specialized in limiting beliefs because it's the thing that changed my life because I had a lot of limiting beliefs, I have tried so many different modalities. And I think they all helped in a different way and at a different time when I really needed that specific modality. So there's also, I think, a real benefit to just opening up to your path as a path and asking yourself, okay, what feels like I need it next? Like, what am I being drawn to next? And not just kind of sticking to the same thing, like, for example, talk therapy or some different modality just because it's proven. There's a lot of other things out there that can really shift very quickly some of your inner dynamics.
I feel like for that kind of awareness to take place as well, we need to become comfortable with silence, because a lot of the times, again, something I notice is that people will get busy and just stay busy and overwhelm themselves with busy. So, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. In that kind of way, they don't really need to explore internally what's going on, because that's extremely uncomfortable. To be alone with yourself, if you have thoughts that you don't like, is extremely uncomfortable. It's painful, right? Becoming comfortable with silence is something really important.
It's so true. And it's something that I think it's normal that the way that our society has evolved, people are finding themselves with so much on their plate. But this is why I think things like meditation are really underrated. Even just something that is a practice of just taking a couple of breaths or something like that, just taking yourself into the present moment, I think is so helpful. It's something that me and a friend of mine who's also a coach, we call this the empty room. It's a tarot card, actually, an oracle card. The empty room is this kind of space of nothingness where you're just sitting in this empty room with the silence and you think that it's empty, but it's actually full of potential. I really love this card and I love this concept because I think that people see it as when they're in silence, they're alone with themselves and they're abandoned and they're just suspended in midair. But actually, they're not alone with themselves. They're also alone with all that is. There's also this kind of beautiful, unlimited field of possibility that they're surrounded by that they're able to better tap into. We fill up all of these things into our lives because we're kind of scared of not having anything and being alone and and I think that when you strengthen the connection to everything that exists in the world, you realize, okay, that's actually not necessarily the case, that I'm not enough and that I'm not doing enough.
I like that. It was actually in a book I read, an exercise like that, very similar, where it says, no music, no reading, obviously no phone, just be by yourself. You can dance if you want to, but mostly just sit down and become comfortable with just being there and not doing anything and see what comes out of it. You don't know what's going to come out from the silence. When all the da noise goes away, it's almost like you can finally see who you are as a person when, all the masks fall off.
That's beautiful. I know that you do modeling. I'm curious how that has influenced your understanding of these masks.
When I came to London years ago, first of all, I wanted to do something different. I wanted to be an actress. And then modeling years later started as something to get into acting. Now, maybe that I've been modeling for about 6-7 years, and I'm older as well. So a lot of models, they model when they're really young and then they stop modeling completely. So there's the age thing. I have this thing where I want to be happy with what I'm doing. With everything that you do, a part of that process won't be like the most enjoyable thing ever. However, I feel personally, I'm so rigid with things that I don't want to do. I'll tell people, no, I do not want to do that because it will actually make me unhappy. It will pull me out of the path that I'm on. There's no need for me to do that thing. So why do I need to do this? One thing that's resulted in is very, very strong boundaries. I don't know if I'm answering the question, but over the past few years, I've been working on my boundaries. Also because I'm a recovering people pleaser. So in my early 20s, had no backbone and no opinion on anything. And that was my early 20s. So then I became the opposite of that. It's an interesting process. I don't know if I answered your question.
I think so, because in a way, I guess my interpretation on this is that the unmasking process was actually you putting in place things for yourself that were more meaningful, like having strong boundaries and creating something that gave your life connection and meaning and not kind of carrying that energy of people pleasing in your life, which I think is really interesting. And I think that is something that a lot of people in the industry kind of need to wear that specific mask because they want to be booked, right? So I think that's really it's interesting that you really just prioritize your peace and your own inner stability. I think that's really special.
It's funny that the process of change and how we're always changing. Sometimes I have the belief that there should be an endpoint in the near future where I become the person that I want to be. But realistically speaking, our entire lives, we become someone else, we grow, we mold into different things, we evolve. So when I'm thinking about this endpoint, I should come to the realization that that's not going to come. If an endpoint to something that you want momentarily comes, then something else comes along. And I feel like a lot of people want that endpoint, right?
I think the reason that people feel that they want it to end and they want this like sense of stability is because we've been marketed this, right? Like from very young ages, it's like, okay, and then the princess marries the prince and they live happily ever after. And there is just this concept of like happily ever after that I think people don't realize that the happily ever after involves constant flux. You know, like you could be living in a life that you love and you're still growing every day and you're still changing and you're still working through old beliefs and narratives and, you know, kind of accessing new parts of yourself. I think that there's that element of it. And I also think that people who really, really need for things to be stable for them, that's also something to look into. So, is there a need for control? Is there an inability to let go? Is it that you really, really need stability because earlier in your life something happened that kind of shook that center? And these are all things that you can work on, by the way. Even if you have the belief that you need stability or that you're not stable, you can work on that belief. The other thing I would say is that it's not that we're constantly fighting against these new waves of growth. It's just that with each wave, you become maybe more confident in that area of your life, right? So it's not like you're spending 20 years trying to learn how to do liquid eyeliner. At some point, you figure it out well enough, and then you're kind of perfecting and refining on that. And I think it's something that it is very overwhelming when you think about all the different areas in which we're growing at the same time, especially now that we have so much access to information that we can literally grow in any niche direction that we want to grow in. But I think it's also worth knowing that we're incredibly intelligent beings and you putting energy into growing is always going to serve you and it's going to pay dividends in many years to come in very unusual ways that you will never expect. So it's not that you're, okay, I thought I was over with that, but now here comes another moment where I have to grow. It's more like, okay, I managed to increase my levels of experience and confidence in this area, which then helps me to hop into this other area with renewed confidence and to be more able to manage these different sections of my life. And they're all compounding together. So all of the work and the investment that you do into your growth pays off in many different ways. And you're never starting from zero, right? Like that's the thing. You're not starting from zero. So that's something I think that people don't really realize. But if they thought about it like that, it would benefit them a lot more. And realizing that also means that the work that you're doing on your self confidence and your self trust is going into your career, is going into your friendships, is going into your relationship. The work that you do on your technical skills is helping you to get more confidence in yourself and understand that you can learn new things. I think that's kind of the thing that is often overlooked about self-growth and why I also believe that it's such an adventure to be able to get up one morning and learn something new that you totally didn't suspect about yourself and to kind of be like just constantly creating yourself, but not from zero, from the last person that you were, using all of those gifts that that person has presented you with.
There are two things that I am taking from this. One is concept of gratitude and appreciation. A lot of the time, even things that I'm noticing with myself, I might do, and not actually stop and process what I've accomplished because it doesn't feel big enough. It's almost like I need to stop and examine the situation because, wow, a younger version of me would have only dreamt of this, but I'm not appreciating it. My mind is telling me that I'm in this in-between moment, and I started somewhere and I need to get somewhere. Until I get to that place, nothing I do is kind of good enough. So it's something that I have occasionally, and I need to stop and, journal or do gratitudes, daily gratitudes. Time is also so limited and so precious. You can't spend your life waiting for a moment in the future. All we have is the present moment. If we spend all our times looking ahead and not examining and appreciating where we are today, we've wasted our lives, and that's so terrible as a concept.
That's really amazing what you said. I think a lot of people feel like that. Like they have to be at some arbitrary goal, whether that's like they're making X amount of money per month, or they have some accomplishment or prize or accolade or recognition or followers or, something, some arbitrary thing that they've decided that until I do this, I'm just a speck, like I have value until I have this thing. And actually, it's more like, you're creating and doing these incredible things each day that are kind of so valuable. And if you started to see them and really kind of understand them, you would know that you're already there. I think that's the thing is like the more that you look at the same life around you, but you learn to see it differently and experience it and shape it in a new way, that's when you kind of start to craft it and move into the life that you really want. But you have to be able to see it. And I think that's the thing that we just get caught up on so much is just thinking ourselves not enough, not ready enough, not in the right place for whatever reason, whatever narrative. And I think it's really, really important to just start, yeah, like what you said with gratitude, just have the gratitude of all that you are, all that you've already created for yourself. Take it from there and see what else that you can create. And don't worry so much about these milestones. I think a lot of people say this, that when you're achieving these massive milestones that you previously had dreamed of, in the moment that you've achieved it, it seems pretty normal. Like I had a friend, she sold her company and she sold it pretty recently. Like the document was signed just on a random weekday, like a couple of weeks ago. And I've known about the sale of her company for so long. And she's spoken about it for so many different times that I met with her. And then it just so happened that I went for dinner with her and my boyfriend in Paris. And she just shows up to the dinner and told me so casually that today was the day that she had sold her company, right? And it's kind of, I think it's such a good example of like, by the time that this thing that you once dreamed of and conceived of in your mind is actually happening, it's so routine and regular to you that you don't even realize it's a cause for celebration. If you can try and ready yourself to believe that everything that you're doing matters and that you're in the right place, and to just give yourself encouragement, I think, instead of telling yourself that you're not enough, then you still can reach those goals, but you can do it with a different energy. I also think that some people have this belief that if they don't tell themselves that they're not good enough until they achieve XYZ, that they won't be driven to achieve those things. And I think in those situations, you need to unpeel some of the narratives that are associated with that, which might be that you don't have value, that you're not good enough, that you're not good enough unless you do X, Y, Z, that people won't respect you unless you are this person. Really digging into what is it that you've told yourself that's keeping you at that belief, because you can perfectly well encourage yourself and achieve the thing at the same time.
We as human beings are such storytellers, but actually most of the stories that we tell ourselves are not happy. They're negative. They're negative stories. And that's not helpful. That's why I liked that mention of the happily ever after concept, which is why I don't watch movies anymore. Because I feel like it's not really helpful to my mindset.
Yeah, I also don't watch movies that are like horror films or violent films. And I just think that this is obviously different depending on the sensitivity level. But if you're someone who's highly sensitive, then you do want to be a little bit mindful of what you're putting in your mind.
I remember there were a few days where I just started watching some doom videos, one of these unsolved mysteries. And actually, immediately after, I realized I'm not feeling it. That kind of stuff is addictive to nervous system. It's almost like, I don't know neurologically what it creates, but you want more of it and more of it and more of it and more of it. But also another thing that I wanted to touch upon is this concept of ups and downs. Sometimes when we're on a high, and if we've been on a high for a prolonged period of time, and we have accomplished more than we've ever thought we could, and we're growing, and then the low comes, because obviously that's just how progress works and how success works. It's not a line that just goes up. It's a spiral. So it moves, it goes up and goes down. And the higher up it goes, the more of a problem we have when it adjusts a little bit down after. And when we have a problem, then we can easily revert back to unhelpful old loops, because we're like, no, but I was having all this amazing experience, and I was growing, and I was like really happy. And what's happened now? This is not how things are supposed to be. And I'm actually having one of these experiences right now, and it's making me extremely uncomfortable.
I have a couple of different interpretations on this. Like, first, just as an individual who's done a lot of work on herself, and then also as a belief coach. The first thing I think is, of course, it shakes our sense of reality because you're used to things going in a certain way. And then it feels very dramatic when all of a sudden something doesn't work out. So, as a person, I think it's important to kind of develop this robust inner trust and watching yourself in the field of action, navigating and maneuvering through these circumstances so that when these little crises hit, you have the experience of putting yourself in discomfort. So you can practice this by doing all kinds of things that are not comfortable for you in very small doses, but just doing the work so that your inner ecosystem is pretty robust, so that when the things around you start tumbling in whatever way, that you don't start kind of then Xing out or sabotaging or falling into disrepair. I think that there is just like a baseline level of stability in your mind. I've been through a lot of crises in my life, and because I've seen myself overcome them, now I know that when I'm in crises, I don't crumble. But I do think that that took a lot of little moments of working on it and teaching yourself through action that it's okay. And the other thing I would say from a belief perspective is, if you have any internal wounds as a person that are really like unresolved or unhealed, those are usually the ones that get triggered when you're in these situations where things aren't as flowery and beautiful as they usually are, even if it's a momentary dip. That's when your narratives come back online, like what you were saying. And usually those narratives will be related to your beliefs. So I would also recommend working on the core belief, like I am safe, I trust myself, I can rely on other people, it is safe to ask for help, I am good enough, I am valuable, I can take action. All of the kind of key beliefs, and they're different for different people depending on their lives, but a lot of them that are core are I am safe, I trust myself, these kinds of beliefs. If you work on the core beliefs, it usually lessens the blow because you have kind of a baseline solidity in how you deal with these situations. So that's also something I would say, just from the perspective of a belief coach, and which it's a really crazy thing, but a surprising amount of women in particular have the belief that they're not safe. And I work a lot with women entrepreneurs, so I know this. So many of the women that I've tested beliefs with have the belief that they're not safe. And so then when life starts to do what life does, you're then kind of in this very destabilized position because you don't feel safe. And as we know, many women have had experiences that made them feel unsafe, right? But then carrying through the belief of unsafety creates more the sensation of unsafety.
Let's say that's coming from childhood, the belief that you're not safe. What's the first thing, the simplest thing to do to convince yourself you're safe?
So if it's coming from childhood, and if it happened as a result of trauma or something that was, a really difficult experience, it's probably still very present within your mind and your body at a subconscious level. So I would definitely recommend subconscious reprogramming and some energy healing as well, something that basically allows your body to let go of that kind of emotion or whatever it is that is stuck in your system, and to let go of what it's holding on to as a result. in belief work, that would literally be naming who it was, what happened, what they taught you, what you learned from it, releasing the negative aspects of what you learned from it, and then keeping the positive aspects, which is in a way is the opposite of the belief and why you still have that belief, and saying to yourself, I can keep the good things that have kept me safe. And then I'm letting go of all the things that this is actually actively taking me away from. There's also forgiveness involved. There's cutting the link between you and that person and essentially reprogramming it when your body is in a theta brainwave. So you're essentially in kind of a deep meditative state, and what you're being told stays in more of a permanent way. But before you can do that, you have to get to the trauma. So if someone has the belief that they're not safe, usually there's a number of things that have taught them that belief. They will want to get out of their system. This is why I think in these situations, hypnotherapy isn't the modality, because you don't want to just put something on top of it. You want to get to what actually happened. Sometimes in my client sessions, people tell me things that they haven't told people ever before in their whole life. So they've been carrying something their whole life, and that has taught them a particular belief, and they haven't been able to let it go. And so when you let something like that go, that's when you're really kind of releasing yourself a bit. And then you put something else in its place to teach your body, okay, now you're safe and it's okay and you can be safe and all these good things can happen and none of these bad things will happen to you, and you can release all of the things that taught you that. It's a bit of a complicated process, which is why you have people doing it. But yeah, I definitely think that naming the situations, the people, the places, even on your own, even if you sat down with a journal and said, okay, why do I not feel safe? And just writing down everything that comes up is already a good form of release.
Yeah, that's one of the exercises I was doing over a period of a few months, journaling. Okay, so this is why this is coming up. If there's any triggers, this is where this trigger is coming from. Because also when you write things down, you process them, it might be unclear, and when you start writing it, it comes out easier, which is why I love journaling so much.
I love journaling as well. I love journaling in so many different ways. So I journal with prompts, I journal just by itself, I do morning pages. And another thing that I love, which is if anyone is listening and they're a verbal processor, is literally voice journaling. So what I do is I will literally message myself on WhatsApp, and I will do a voice message to myself, and I'll be like, so imagine someone triggers you or something happens and you're really not happy with someone.
Yeah.
But you don't understand, why am I not happy or why did I get triggered by this? I think in those instances, it's really powerful to do voice journaling. So you can be walking down the street, messaging yourself like, oh, I'm really angry at this person, but I don't understand why. And then you're going into it and you're getting answers out of yourself.
I email myself. That's something I do because that's also a way to see, because I'll never go into my notes. What's something that you'd like to end with?
It doesn't really matter where you're trying to go. What is in the way between you and where you're trying to be is literally a series of beliefs that you have about yourself and how the world works. So wherever it is that you're trying to be, whatever you're trying to do, if you can start to become aware of what those beliefs are and start to unwind them and unravel them and untie them from your reality, from what you consider to be true, that's when you start to get real agency, real choice, real freedom within your life, because you start to actually rise above these stories that you have imported into your inner ecosystem. And you start to choose for yourself what is actually true for you. And you can even replace that with a more beautiful truth and a more aligned truth. And the other thing I would say for anyone out there who is really doubting is that your beliefs can change. They absolutely can change. And I think that, when you hear people talking about it, and we hear podcasts and we hear, we watch TV shows and we think, okay, they're talking about this, but it's easy for them to say because they're on TV or they're living their dream job or whatever that may be. I just really, really, really cannot emphasize enough how true it is and how real it is that a belief that is literally making your life living hell right now can change and can literally disappear from your life and can be moved on from. And I want you to realize that, because so many people just don't believe it can change. And that is holding them back, literally just not believing that things can change for them. And I'm here to tell you that they can. and you can change so many different things about yourself that you don't like, that are actively hurting you, and rise above it and accept a more beautiful and a more amazing way of being in the world.